Greetings, fellow Bible readers. Welcome to a special video for our read through of God's Word. We're going to tackle Bible weights and measurements. Now that we're into the book of Exodus, into especially the second half, we're going to run into a lot more measurements in these books of the Bible. And so it'd be a good idea to have in your mind an idea of what those Bible measurements translate into in real life terms. And we're going to look at 4 different types of measurements. We're going to look at measurements that deal with length, weight, liquid measure, and dry measure. So let's start with the length measurements. Those are usually the easiest to grasp because they deal with parts of your body to be able to measure how big they are. First is the hand breadth. That's the smallest of them. And that is if you take your hand and put it like this, a hand breadth is the width of your 4 fingers. And for most people, that comes out to about 3 inches. The second measurement you want to be familiar with is the span, which is the distance from your pinky finger to your thumb when they are fully extended. For most people, that's a distance of about 8 to 9 inches. The third measurement that you'll want to be familiar with, and it's the most common length measurement in the Bible, is the cubit. The cubit is the distance from the tip of your longest finger down to your elbow. On most people, that's a measurement that varies between about 16 to 18 inches. 18 is kind of the standard that most Bible translations will default to when they convert measurements from cubits into inches or feet. Next, let's tackle some weight measurements. The smallest weight measurement in the Bible that you want to be familiar with is the gerah, G-E-R-A-H. And a gerah translates into 1/50th of an ounce. That may not help you a whole lot because you might be wondering how much does 1/50th of an ounce weigh? If you want something that you can relate it to that you might have around the house, 1 gerah would be about the equivalent of 9 seeds of cereal, so like rice or corn or grain. So if you picture like 9 popcorn kernels or 9 little grains of rice, that's about the weight of a gerah. That's going to be close enough to give you an idea of it. The second weight measurement you'll want to be familiar with is the shekel. A shekel, when it's not referring to a specific coin and it's used as a measurement of weight, is something that weighs out to 2/5 of an ounce. To help you understand that, what you need is a couple of quarters. If you take 2 US quarters and put them in your hand, that is 2/5 of an ounce because 5 quarters weigh about 1 ounce. The third unit of measurement for weight that you want to be familiar with is the talent. And that's the biggest unit of measurement for weight that we want to talk about. It comes out to 75 pounds is the rough equivalent to a talent. Now, with all of these measurements, but especially with the talent, there can be some variation. Throughout history, in different times and in different places, the talent has weighed as little as 50 pounds and as much as 110 pounds, and 75 is about the average that most sources will point to as the weight for talents in the Bible. Now let's move on to some liquid measurements. There are 2 liquid measurements you'll want to be familiar with. One is the log, L-O-G, just like a tree log. And that is a measurement that comes out to about 2/3 of a pint or 10 ounces. To help you visualize that amount of liquid, at the store you can get water bottles that are 16 ounces. Those are kind of the standard water bottles that you can buy. There are also miniature ones that are only 10 ounces large. And a 10-ounce water bottle is pretty much the same size as a log. So if you can picture one of those, or if you have one around the house, that's the amount of liquid that a log is talking about. The other liquid measurement you'll want to be familiar with is the hin, H-I-N. And a hin comes out to just about the same as 1 gallon. So whenever you read about hins, if you just think gallons of milk, you'll have a pretty good idea of the amount of liquid that's being talked about. Finally, let's cap off with some dry measurements. In the Bible, the smallest dry measurement that you'll want to be familiar with is the omer, O-M-E-R. Not to be confused with the homer, H-O-M-E-R, that we're going to talk about in a minute. But the omer, with just an O at the beginning, is a little bit over 2 quarts. And if you're wondering, well, okay, how much is 2 quarts when you measure it in dry measurement, because in English, dry quarts and liquid quarts aren't identical. If you go to the store and you buy blueberries, they're sold by the pint. So this is a pint container of blueberries right here. 2 quarts is 4 pints. And so 1 omer would be 4 of these containers put together. The next Bible measurement that you'll want to be familiar with when it comes to dry measures is the seah, S-E-A-H. And a seah is about 7 quarts. Now, instead of picturing the number of blueberry containers that 7 quarts would be in dry measures, there's another English measure that's a lot closer and maybe more helpful, and that is the peck. 1 seah is equal to a little bit less than 1 peck. And you can sometimes find at stores, like at our local grocery store, they sell apples by the half peck. So I've got a half peck bag right here of apples. I'll put it right next to my head, and you can see it's about the size of my head, maybe a little bit bigger. And so 1 peck would be 2 of these bags. And so a seah in Bible measurements would be the equivalent of just a little less than these 2 bags right here. The next Bible measurement that you want to be familiar with is the ephah, E-P-H-A-H. An ephah is a bit bigger of a measurement. It comes out to 2/3 of a bushel. And as long as you can sit down, you can visualize a bushel fairly easily. Because all you need to do is sit down in your favorite chair. Just make sure it's not a recliner, because you've got to be sitting upright to do this. But you sit down in your chair and you put your arms out at shoulder height like this. And the area, the volume that is made up of everything from shoulder height down to your lap and bounded by that circle your arms make, that is about a bushel. And so an ephah would be 2/3 of that space filled up. The last Bible measure for dry measuring that you want to be familiar with is the homer, H-O-M-E-R, and that is the equivalent of 6 1/3 bushels. So picture 6 of these plus another third, and that's what a homer is. So those are some of the more common Bible measurements. There are a few others that are out there, but if you're familiar with those, you'll probably be able to make a lot more sense out of some of the things you'll be reading in Exodus and Leviticus and onwards into the Old Testament. Lord's blessings on your reading.